Case file number 3429, written by Jerry Bryant. The Ghost of a Memory. 4 years ago, I was driving from a job site late one night. It was a 2.5-hour drive back to the shop. I vividly remember being pulled over, a deputy walking up to my window, and then waking up briefly, looking down, seeing them cut my pants off, and looking at my left arm, and it was completely missing, with a tourniquet on. I even remember the intense pain of the tourniquet being torqued down so tight on my upper arm. Next thing I know, I come to the ICU, and my brother and my father are sitting there. I try to speak, but I have a tube down my throat, and immediately look at my arm, thinking it's gone. But nope, it's there. I move my hands, trying to make sense of what happened, and nothing makes any sense. Supposedly, the events of the night transpired like this. According to the police report, I was driving on an old highway where the speed limit was 65 miles per hour. It was around some old mines, taking back roads home, so there were no streetlights or anything like that. I supposedly was traveling 65 to 70 miles per hour, and a drunk driver had passed out and left his truck sitting in the middle of the road with no lights on. I hit him head on, going 65 or 70, then airlifted and intubated. I don't know what happened to him, but I walked away with a broken collarbone, tailbone, and 2 ribs, along with the nasty bruise from the seatbelt. The work truck was completely annihilated, but nothing happened to my arm. So here's where it gets weird. I have this ultra-vivid recollection of being pulled over by a cop, flashing lights, rolling my window down, and then waking up briefly in a helicopter and seeing my arm gone, and feeling excruciating pain from the tourniquet. And then I woke up, and supposedly was never pulled over by any deputies in the area, and didn't lose my arm. I know the brain is a funny thing, and I know we can essentially completely block things out, but to fabricate an experience like getting pulled over and losing an arm? The events of that night are still very strange to me. Given how bad the wreck was, I realistically should be dead. Did I jump timelines? Hop to a different parallel universe? Completely lose my mind and make up something that didn't happen? The only problem is, of everything I remember that night, seeing my arm missing and the intense pain from the tourniquet and the cop are the only things I vividly remember. Everything else is completely erased from my memory. In fact, the only thing I remember before the accident and the cop was pulling out at the job site. From the moment I pulled out until the moment I woke up in the hospital, it's pretty much all gone. Is this a glitch? Or is my brain acting funny as a result of trauma? So the brain is capable of creating false memories in order to protect yourself from trauma. However, I've never heard of a false memory being worse than the real thing. So if this isn't quantum immortality, nothing happened, you just survived, and your brain concocted a worse memory than the original where you didn't lose your arm? That would be odd. That's not impossible, but it would be a weird choice by your brain if that's the case. So I'm going to go with quantum immortality because of that. And it's one of those cases where you do remember basically the fragments of your death. The moments that, if you lose your arm, you can survive that, but that's a lot of blood loss, that's a lot of trauma. You can absolutely die from that. So, is that what happened? That'd be my bet. Welcome, I'm Paul, this is Dave. Today I have 12 Glitch in the Matrix and paranormal stories for you. My favorite story involves Johnny, just because it's so unique. Let's get to it. Case file number 3430, written by Sephiroth 912. I open at the close. When I was little, I used to go to an after-school program after my classes were over. One day, I was reading a book, and the next thing I remember, I was on the ground flat and completely broke down in tears. The people running the thing come over and ask what's wrong, and I tell them that my grandfather just died. The whole time up until my dad came to get me, I was a wreck, hysterical even, to the point that they couldn't calm me down at all. When my dad did come to get me, they told him why I was crying. It turned out that my grandfather died earlier that day, but nobody had told me. Hell, nobody that knew could have gotten a hold of me, short of coming and actually picking me up. I'm not religious, but damn if that whole ordeal doesn't keep me up late at night sometimes. I like to think that we're connected to people we love. You know, you have that quantum entanglement factor where you can't use it to transmit information, but it is a real process and something that bothered Einstein so much because at the fundamental layer of reality, particles can become connected. You have one particle here and it has to know because there's no hidden variables when the other particle collapses and it has to be the opposite of it. If we're talking in perfect degrees, symmetrical. In short, all that means is that they are connected. We can't know what it'll be beforehand, before we measure it, so there's no way to transmit information faster than light. But they are still intrinsically connected. Now, there's many theories on how that's possible. The many worlds interpretation is probably my favorite. It aligns pretty well with the quantum immortality, parallel universes and all that. Simply put, that everything that can happen does happen, so it's not really a mystery. You don't need hidden variables because of that. But there's plenty of other, I don't want to go on a tangent on physics today. I just think it's cool that there is a process of connecting particles that we can't fully explain. We have theories, but we can't definitively know. So why couldn't that happen even at the macro scale between people that maybe it's love, maybe it's just people that we think about a lot? If something happens to them, it's almost like their wave state collapses and then you just know. You can't really act on that information. It's just something you feel. It's just a feeling. And sometimes in this case, if it's a negative feeling, it can be completely overwhelming. I've never personally experienced this. My grandmother passed away a couple years ago and I didn't feel anything when it happened. I didn't know the exact moment, like in this case. But you still get a kind of like a blanket wave of depression. Depression might be too strong a word for my case, but you get a sense that something's closing in. But I guess that could just be from the information that someone is ill, so it could happen at any moment. It's not quite like this, but still. And maybe it does depend on a specific mind. I think the younger you are, the more open your mind is to new calibration pathways. The older you get, the more reinforced and set in stone they are. Not completely set in stone, but, harder to form new ones. Case file number 3431, written by the Magnificent One. The Impossible Bookmark. I sat my book down in the middle of the room while I went to see what my mom was calling me for. She just had a quick question, so I was back in my room in less than a minute, and the book was gone. I was completely stunned because there was zero possibility that anyone could have taken it. I ended up locking my bedroom door and searching the entire room carefully for like 45 minutes, even literally getting down on my hands and knees and crawling over the exact spot on the floor where the book should have been several times, just to make sure my eyes weren't playing tricks on me. Even if I was somehow completely overlooking the book, I'd at least feel it when I crawled on it, right? But nothing there, just the carpet. I finally ran out of places to search and glanced back at the empty place on the floor, and the fricking book was there. I was so freaked out. Literally, the chills were crazy. And I was so scared because it's the only time I ever saw firsthand definitive proof that there are things that happen in this world that don't follow the rules as we know them. Things shouldn't vanish and reappear under their own power, but that book did. I thought if that could happen, then maybe anything could happen. Demons could come walking through the walls, and parallel universes could collide. Animals could start talking like people, or aliens could show up and take over the planet. I wondered if I was going crazy, but nothing else happened. The book just sat there, innocently looking like a normal book, in exactly the same position I left it in, open to the same page. Never had another vanishing or reappearing object episode. That was about 25 years ago. I still have the book, and it looks brand new because I don't really like to touch things. I'm a very skeptical atheist who doesn't believe in mystical stuff, and I'm sure there must be some kind of science-based explanation, but that's not any kind of science we know about currently. So just a quick note on this story, just the end point, the end sentence, you say that it's science that we don't know yet, and that's what I think it is. I don't really believe in magic. I believe in things we can't yet fully explain with the scientific method, but there is an explanation. what is the difference between magic and science? It's just, can you explain it? Can you reproduce it? It's like electricity. If you had no concept of electricity, and you were a fictional writer, and you tried to incorporate electricity into a fiction novel, again with no prior understanding of it, it would just seem like magic in many ways, but has defined rules. So as long as those rules are defined and can be described and reproduced, I don't think it's magic, I just think it's cool. Case file number 3432, written by Chicken Nugget 000. Materialized in blue. When I was around 17, I was getting ready to go out to meet a friend for coffee. I grabbed my makeup bag to do my makeup and tried to find my beauty blender. I had a set of 3 blue beauty blenders. 2 of them had already gone missing, which was weird because I kept them all in the same makeup bag and never took it anywhere. I was sure I still had one left. When I opened up the bag, it wasn't there. I searched over and over, but it was just gone. I was really annoyed. I had a younger cousin who lived next door and came over almost every day, and I started thinking she might have taken it. I went into my sister's room with my makeup bag. My mom was there too, and I started venting about my cousin, saying she keeps stealing my stuff and being annoying. They told me to calm down and help me look for it, but it wasn't anywhere. Eventually I gave up, sat on the floor, and started doing my makeup anyway. I was using a small, compact mirror. When I looked down to grab a brush, there was a blue beauty blender sitting right in front of me. I knew for a fact it hadn't been there before. I just stared at it, completely confused. Then, right in front of my eyes, another one appeared. Before I could even react, a third one appeared. Literally right in front of my eyes. I still don't exactly understand how to explain it. It wasn't like I suddenly noticed them. I actually saw them appear, like they materialized out of thin air really fast. My mom and sister saw it too. They didn't see the exact moment the way I did, but they saw them appear there out of nowhere. All 3 of us were shocked. None of us could believe what we were seeing. It felt completely unreal. Case file number 3433, written by Embarrassed Process 86. The Scent of Copper and Ice. Context. I'm not in the US, so if anything sounds odd, it's probably due to that. I go to a night school. I'm 19, used to work and study in nursing and caretaking, ages 15 to 17, but had to stop, so I'm trying to graduate late. A town over, and my parents currently have to pick me up and drive me home at night. My dad usually takes a highway. It's been snowing a lot here, so roads are icy. The story. After my last class, my school friends and I met a new person in the hallway and we fooled around for a little bit. I knew I didn't have a lot of time because my dad was waiting outside the school. I looked at my phone, which was in my hand, and said I had to go because it was late. With my phone in my hand, I went to my dad's car. I awkwardly threw my bag into the car with my shoulder since I was once again holding my phone. I don't know why I didn't put it somewhere else, I'm weird. When I sit in my dad's passenger seat, I always hold my phone in my hands, between my knees. We started driving, and I felt the pop socket on one palm like always. We got on the highway, which was a little frozen, and a guy in front of us was speeding. We now know it was a drunk driver because it was on the road service radio channel thing. The drunk driver's car swerved on the ice and turned and then toppled over. By this point, there was a huge oil transporter between us who braked extremely suddenly to avoid hitting the toppled car. My dad swerved and did some weird maneuver stuff, barely avoiding the oil transporter, which was on my side. When we were swerving past it, I smelled a very intense blood scent for about 2 seconds, which I can't explain, very metallic. I stopped feeling my phone at this moment and assumed it fell down or slipped out of my hands while our car was swerving, and I thought to myself that I'd just pick it up when we get home. When we got home, I couldn't find it anywhere, even with a flashlight, and we then saw that one of my school friends had texted my dad from my phone, saying I'd left it on the desk at school. My school friend said he had only noticed my phone suddenly lying on the desk a while after I already had left, which would line up almost exactly with the time that I was in the oil transporter situation. Case file number 3434, written by Anonymous. Corner of the eye. When my wife and I split up, she moved into a new house and got a dog. I was over there for a while, since we have a daughter together. For a few days, I kept seeing shadows down the hallway out of the corner of my eye. I know people say that there can be ghosts and spirits that watch you and disappear when you look at them, but I don't believe that nonsense. I just chalked it up to me seeing things. Anyway, the dog was just a puppy at the time, and she and I would be sitting in the living room when I would see something out of the corner of my eye in the hallway. I'd turn to look at the dog and would perk up her ears and run to the exact spot I saw something and sniff. Occasionally, she would run to the exact spot and bark at nothing. I stayed there for a few weeks, and just about every day, late at night, I would see something in the hallway that disappeared. When I saw it, I would try not to move, try not to alert the dog, but every time, she could sense it too, and she would walk over as if stalking something and sniffing the exact area. One of the last nights I'm there, it's dark and I see a dull flash, like movement or a shadow streaking past. I swear I see it. It's like something came out of the wall on the side and ran at the closed closet door on the other side of the hall. The dog goes crazy and runs in there, barking at the closet door. I'm pretty freaked out, but I chase after her and throw the closet door open. Out races a little brown mouse. The dog chases it to the garage but loses it. I called an exterminator a few days later and haven't seen any shadows or movement in the hallway since. I guess it was just an infestation. Case file number 3435, written by It's a Hard Knock Life for Us. A neighborhood watch. My husband was out last night driving for Uber Eats. Around 10:30, he missed his turn, and when he went into reverse, he saw what he described as a 7-foot-tall figure with long black hair, like the girl from The Ring or The Grudge's hair, standing in the middle of the road. This road is not a main road, it's tucked away in a neighborhood in our small northern Arizona town, which consists of mostly retired people. He said he started reversing to get a closer look, because he couldn't believe what he was seeing. It jumped or just appeared 20 feet further back in the blink of an eye. He reversed again to get closer, and the same thing. It seemingly teleported backwards another 20 feet. I believe this happened for a third time, before a car was approaching, and he had to get out of the way and he left. He said it was absolutely terrifying, like straight out of a horror movie. He's not one to make up something like this. He's not the prankster type or anything. He doesn't even believe in this type of stuff, so I 100% believe him. Case file number 3436, written by JFWPA, in the blink of an eye. Now, things are getting weird, really freaking weird. I walk a certain route 5 days a week, day and night, whatever I feel like. Twice now, I have seen cars seem to vanish when I look back at them from where they were. It happened a few months ago in daylight when I saw a car pull into a driveway. The garage door was closed, and I blinked and it's gone. Tonight, a car was approaching me with headlights on, about 60 feet away. I glanced down to check if any ice was on the ground, so I could move over a bit, and when I looked up, nothing. I looked to see if it turned off somewhere, lights out, whatever, but nothing. I was stone cold sober, no drugs. I'm not afflicted with psychosis or any other pathology. Nothing but enjoying my walk. I'm trying to be rational with this, as I could not care less how it's happening or not happening, just what is happening. To add some other happenings that have occurred lately, to see if you think there's a linkage. About a week ago, while I was walking into the kitchen, a loud human-sounding moan came out of nowhere. My cat ran to a far corner, swung around as if sensing something, and went into protective mode, scanning the area kinda frantically. I then hear water running down a pipe from the second floor. I go upstairs and the toilet had been flushed and was filling back up, finally stopping just like normal. I was the only one at home. Again, sober, relaxed, well rested, nothing but what I'm telling you. And I'm a skeptic to these types of things, but here we are. Case file number 3437, written by Lalula18. The playlist on the pillow. I used to work in a place where we weren't allowed anything with access to the internet on our desks. So, I had a little MP3 player I could download music and podcasts on prior to work, and then listen throughout the day to occupy myself. I was in the car park to go home and realized I had left my MP3 player on the desk. I was mildly annoyed and checked everywhere, but couldn't be bothered to go back in. I even knew exactly where I had left it, as I had put it in a certain place thinking, I'll remember, and then never did. The next morning, I went in expecting to find it on my desk where I was working. This was only a very small team with set desks. No one would have been in or moved anything in the meantime. It was gone, and I started to panic. I searched everywhere in the office, but it was nowhere to be seen. At the end of the day, I went home defeated and very irritated that I'd lost it, as it was such a needed item for getting through the workday. Plus, I hadn't bought it that long ago. Lo and behold, I got home, and on the bed that I had both slept in and remade in the morning was my MP3 player. I lived with my parents, but they had not been in my room or even knew what the thing was. A, it was not on my person from leaving the office on the first day. B, even if I somehow had it, I had been to bed and then remade the bed. How was it placed so central to the bed? C, endless question marks. D, I literally knew where I left it. How did it disappear and then show up in an entirely new space? Case file number 3438, written by MetalSlug53, Johnny's Final Sunset. An older experience. Many of you, I'm sure, probably know who Johnny Castaway is. For those of you who do not, when the Windows 3.1 system was released, a small offshoot group of Sierra Online called Screen Antics released a screensaver called Johnny Castaway. In short, Johnny Castaway was a man who was marooned on an island. He would walk around his ridiculously small island, performing random humorous acts, such as fishing, exercising, sleeping, writing SOS messages, and throwing them out to sea in bottles. Cooking, building sandcastles, diving from his palm tree, and building a raft. Generally, these activities would randomly loop, and about every 7 to 8 minutes a silly thing would happen to Johnny, such as being struck by lightning from a cloud he summoned while doing a rain dance, or having a bird steal his book he was reading, or flirting with a mermaid, or being eaten by a shark, or being invaded by tiny pirates on a tiny pirate ship. The possibilities were endless, and as a child, I fell in love with the screensaver instantly. About 2 years ago, I had resurfaced Johnny Castaway somehow from my subconscious. Having a desire to once again see my childhood memories play out on screen, I searched online and found a place where I could download the screensaver. For some odd reason, the old Windows 3.1 screensaver files had an issue running on Windows XP, so I found a tutorial on how to convert the file. About 5 minutes of handiwork later, I had Johnny Castaway running smoothly on the screen of my laptop. I found it intriguing how many different quirky situations the island inhabitant would find himself in, so many more than I actually remember seeing as a kid. I vaguely remembered as Johnny played out some slightly humorous scenarios on my screensaver and soaked up all the nostalgia I was producing. I could literally taste it. Johnny has been my screensaver ever since. However, earlier tonight, something very odd happened with Johnny as I was watching him pacing back and forth once again as he did time after time on his crappy little island. It was set at night, the moon full and luminescent in the background, and the island looked large due to the tide change. Johnny approached the left side of the island as he has done so many times in the past, pulled out an all too familiar bottle and piece of paper, and began to scribble on the parchment as he had done millions of times before. The thought bubble appeared above his head, but this time instead of an SOS like every other time I had seen, the words, "God be with me," hovered over his head. I had to reread it before it quickly vanished. I literally did a double take. There I was, sitting in my college class, listening to my professor droning on and on about some sort of chemical bond, and Johnny Castaway is literally preying on my screen. I have never seen him do that before. My attention shifted 100% to what was happening on screen. Instead of rolling up the parchment and slipping it in the bottle, as he had done before, he instead mashes and crumbles the paper furiously, attempting to shove it down the neck of the bottle. Eventually, the bottle shatters. He gets very frustrated and tosses both the crumpled parchment and the broken glass into the sea, and proceeds to sit in the fetal position for at least 5 minutes, blood dripping from his hand where he was cut from the broken glass. He sat there for such a long time that I thought the screensaver had frozen. I moved the mouse and was prompted with "Enter password" on screen. I promptly typed in my password, did a bit of screen organization to make it look as if I was doing something important, and waited the 5 minutes of inactivity I had set before the screensaver would kick back in. When it did, I wasn't prepared for what I saw. The screensaver started back up with Johnny sitting in his tree, much like he would sit when reading a book, except he didn't have a book in his hand. He just sat there staring down with a blank, emotionless expression, blood still dripping down his hand from where he had cut it, and a shadowy figure was crouched down behind him. The figure was relative to Johnny's size and had a human shape to it, but it had a ghastly aura about it. The outline of it seemed to actually be rendered from the sprites used for Johnny, but void of all details and characteristics. You could only tell that it was a shadow of a person. The only detail that it did have was its eyes, big, bulging, and bloodshot red. The shadow figure walks over to the slumped-over Johnny from behind the palm tree. It knelt down and looked as if it were whispering something into Johnny's ear. After it spoke to Johnny, Johnny hung his head down low and looked as if he was sobbing heavily, his head between his knees. The shadow figure then swooped away, much like a cloud or a puff of smoke, and Johnny seemed to compose himself. He stood up, walked behind the palm tree, and emerged on the other side with a length of rope, a noose tied in one end. I watched in horror as Johnny slung the rope over the center of the palm tree and climbed up to fashion his own noose. He settled himself on top of the tree and laced the noose around his neck. He looked up to the sky, and tears rolled down his eyes. The shadowy figure swooped back into the frame and hovered over Johnny as it grew bigger, almost twice the size of when it was initially on screen the first time. A large gray hand emerged from the shadow and made a pointing gesture towards the ground. It was then that I noticed upon closer inspection that Johnny was not crying, he was bleeding from his eyes. The tears had a dark red shade to it, one that I almost mistook for black. At this point I heard a faint crackle coming from the speakers on my laptop, but thought nothing of it then. At this point I was very unnerved by what I was seeing. Johnny Castaway, once a happy island dweller caught up in cartoonish antics and scenarios, much like you would see in a Wile E. Coyote cartoon, was now a broken-down old man sobbing his eyes out and contemplating an ending. The shadow swooped across the screen almost to the right edge, and out of nowhere an ear-piercing scream sounded from my laptop speakers, followed by a very loud demonic voice that simply yelled, "Get it over with!" This startled nearly every person in my classroom. The last thing I remember seeing was Johnny jumping from the palm. You can imagine the rest. Then I slammed my screen closed. I apologized to the entire class, packed up my crap, and bolted. I just witnessed a beloved cartoon character from my youth end himself after being tempted by that evil freaking shadow. Apparently, there is a setting that will allow audio to be played when the screensaver is active, giving Johnny sound effects, muffles, groans, and voice if you choose to activate the option. I inspected the sound files of the screensaver, but could not find anything resembling a high-pitched scream or someone yelling, "Do it!" I did find 2 rather large files that were both corrupted to the point where the system would not even recognize them, but I have no idea if they have anything to do with this. The kicker to it all is that I had the sound options turned off when all of this happened. The second I had an opportunity to try to load the screensaver, the data simply wouldn't load. I tried going into the screensaver options and previewing the screensaver, but was only ever met with an error code. I changed to a different screensaver to verify that it was working, but the computer wouldn't let me change back to the Johnny Castaway files. So I actually had this screensaver as well growing up. I don't remember it as vividly as this person did, and I certainly never experienced anything demonic from it. My guess is, if you're going on a website and downloading the program, who knows what alterations were made to it. So could this have simply been someone that altered the file to eventually produce this demonic scene and override the audio settings so you'd hear it, and after the fact just corrupt the file so you can't go back and check? That kind of sounds like a prank in a way, technological prank, but extremely dark. And I think that the audio setting was disabled is probably the strongest evidence that it was more of a demonic presence. I don't know how easy that would be to do in code. If you could alter that, it may be possible. I'm not a coder, so it's certainly possible that this was a elaborate demonic technical prank. But we also know that spirits, and what is a demon, I think, is just a rotten spirit, you could say, can affect the electromagnetic spectrum. So if anything could influence outside of code, the visuals you see on a screen, it would be a spirit or demon in this case. So could it have been a haunting? Yeah. And that's why I love this story. It's so very unique. You never hear about techno hauntings like this. Case file number 3439, written by Cthulhu204. The Caddy-Corner Conundrum. I need to preface by saying that my wife and I have a home office with two matching desks at a 90-degree angle to one another. Caddy-Corner between is a small end table with drawers. My Logitech steering wheel sits on a homemade, portable rig in front of said table, blocking the drawers, also placed Caddy-Corner. I pick my wife up from work, and on the way to Walmart she asked me if I had moved her pack of Sharpies that she has in the office. No, where were they? She says, on my desk, where I always keep them. I had not touched them, I told her. She insists that they are not where she put them only a few days before when grabbing a new one. Sorry, love, I don't know what to tell you, but I didn't touch them. She's getting adamant at this point. I know where they are. I use them all the time for work. Okay, so I drop her at Walmart, 2 minutes from home, and when I get home I set about finding her missing Sharpies. Yay, I found them quickly. I text her to let her know. Here's the fun part. They were in the third of 4 drawers in the aforementioned table, which was blocked by my steering wheel. I had placed that wheel there in late October of last year, as stated, blocking the drawers. It had not moved or been used at all until today. She insists that she removed one from the package just days prior to this, and when I opened the drawer and saw the package, I did recall that I had seen it on her desk recently myself. How did something my wife saw a few days ago end up in a drawer that was blocked months ago? My wife could not have put them there herself, as she's handicapped and does not have the ability to move my rig. So I know it wasn't her. Case file number 3440, written by Healthy Recover 8904, The Mansion's Gift. I was on the bus, driving to work. I admired the massive, modern mansion on top of the hill, imagining how nice it would be to live in a place like that. When my shift ended, I couldn't find my wallet anywhere. I searched my locker, pockets, but they were gone. I had to borrow money from a coworker to be able to go home by bus. Everything was in that wallet. My ID, bus card, money, pictures of my children. I had to order new cards. A year went by and me and my friend went to a bar that recently opened. There, I met the owner, who was some 10 years younger than me, but very nice and polite. The next time I came to the bar, he greeted me like we're old friends. He sat down with me and said he's glad he finally met me. Then he told me a story. He lived with his parents in the main city, and the mansion, which I still admire whenever I'm on the bus, is their holiday residence. His father built it for his grandmother who lives there. A year ago, he came to a brief visit to his grandmother, and she showed him the wallet that she found in front of the house, at the doorstep. No neighbors miles away. She said she had no idea how it got there, and gave it to him to do with whatever he thought should be done with it. He apologized to me that he didn't contact me sooner, that he placed the wallet on the sideboard in his room and forgot about it. A few months later, he came to his grandmother again because he landed a deal about the bar. he looked at my wallet again and found out my ID had passed the date. Then he primarily focused on his business and put the thought about the wallet aside. When he first saw me in the bar, he recognized me instantly, and from that day on, he always carried the wallet with him. "I couldn't just throw it away," he said. "I figured if nothing, you'd at least want the pictures back." I held the wallet in my hand and I couldn't believe it. Everything was still there, even the money. How did it ever end up in front of his grandmother's house, the one I was looking and admiring at? And this one was a contender for one of my favorites today too, just because again it's so unique. We have DOP all the time, but to reappear at a house you were looking at, it's almost like some spirit was looking at you, trying to look out for you in a way, and like put this breadcrumb in their path so a connection would be formed. And you could, I don't know if you ended up visiting the mansion, but this would be a catalyst to maybe allow for that to happen. So, outside of actually buying the mansion, which probably would take a while to earn enough money for that, this is a way to introduce you in there. So it does feel very specific and absolutely intentionally placed. But by who? A long-lost relative, a friend who passed away who is looking out for you? Or maybe your guardian angel? Definitely someone who cares about you, but isn't material in that conventional sense. Now time for the jokes of the day. I got fired from my job because I kept asking my customers whether they would prefer smoking or non-smoking. Apparently the correct terms are cremation and burial. The final choice. I caught my son chewing on electrical cords. I grounded him until he could learn to conduct himself properly. President Lincoln's steakhouse was a huge success until he declared seasoning unconstitutional. Customers were stunned to learn he'd abolished savory. What has two butts and kills people? An assassin. Wife worries about husband's safety and calls him and says, "Be careful driving home. Some complete moron is driving down the wrong side of the motorway." The husband replies, "There's not just one, there's bloody hundreds of them." Video up here. YouTube thinks you'll like it. Check it out. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe. I'll see you next time.